What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and today we ask one simple question. What's the scariest thing you have ever experienced? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Biking in the woods with my dad. We stopped to rest at his request, and he complained about chest pain. Then he lost consciousness and became unresponsive. He stopped breathing and I started CPR. We were about 2 miles into the trail, and it was getting late. I called 911 and continued CPR with 911 on speaker. It took about 25 minutes for first responders to find us. I continued CPR the entire time until EMS showed up. I didn't think I could continue, I was getting so exhausted. It was by far the most afraid I've ever been. I felt alone and completely helpless. I even considered hoisting him on my bike and thought maybe I could run him out of the trail to find help, but realized that wasn't really possible. He didn't make it, and it affected me for a while afterwards. I thought it was at the time he had had a heart attack, and the autopsy later confirmed it was. I'm at peace with it now. I gave him the best chance I could. I will never forget the complete and total helplessness I felt. I got rear-ended, stopped at a light on my motorcycle. I flew right over the guy that hit me, easily 10-15 feet in the air, and landed on my back. Watched my bike get smushed into a pancake between the car that hit me and the car in front of me. I was shocked at the amount of people that came out of their cars to ask if I was alright. It took me a while to get my breath back. Had to throw off my helmet. Felt like a fish out of water. Something about the way the bike got crushed, and I realized I would most certainly not be alive had I not gotten thrown off the bike. The driver that hit me was on his phone. It wasn't scary at the time, but I was on vacation in Greece visiting family. We boarded a plane in Athens bound for JFK. 'Twas TWA Flight 881. If you're not aware, the flight number is indicative of a route. Anyway, we land, disembark, get our luggage, hop on the BQE, then the George Washington Bridge. Meanwhile, the airplane refueled, boarded new passengers, and it changed call signs to TWA Flight 800. We were somewhere in Jersey when it blew up over the Long Island Sound. That same airplane we had just landed in. So yeah, I hate flying now. Well, I want to keep it on topic, but I have to comment on this because I was on Long Island when it happened. If you want to talk about a mystery, because I don't want to say the word conspiracy, look into Flight 800 if you haven't already. When I first moved into my new house in 2016, every night I would hear random bangs during the night. It horrified me, but I just took the guess that it was my dog. Well, one night at around 4 a.m., I hear a huge bang and then my door opening. See, I have no effing clue what it was, so I pretend to be asleep and let it be. So after a few minutes, my door closes and I run to grab my phone. As I'm walking across the house, I go and look under the couch. Can you guess what I saw? An effing chipmunk. I've been terrorized by a chipmunk for 3 months. Probably the scariest night of my life. A tornado warning. I was only 12, but tornadoes terrified me and still do. I remember my grandparents waking me up. They had known about the tornado before we did, and we apparently took a long time to actually wake up. My family was rushing around the house in a panic to grab clothes, shoes, pets, etc. I also remember running to my grandma's house, as it was the safest place we could get to in the storm. I wasn't dressed in very warm clothing and tripped into a puddle of mud, so I was cold, wet, and afraid. Luckily, it passed us. When I was 18, I had a job at a crap motel, cleaning, doing laundry, and a guest came running out of a room screaming that her son was having a seizure. I asked her if she called 911 and she just kept screaming. I did not want to go in the room. It was not a nice motel. But I figured she was attracting too much attention to be trying to lure a teenaged girl into her room, so I went in. Her son, a young teen, I guess, was on the floor having a seizure, and I called 911. I didn't know what to do except give them the address and his approximate age and put a couple pillows around his head. His mother did nothing but cry. I felt very helpless and very uninformed about what to do. Edited for punctuation. It happened 5 years ago. I was 18 and took a summer job for a month at our local hospital. Every year, part of the hospital is under reconstruction, so my job was to clean this place. Usually I worked with my peers. We were a group of 4, and each day we had to clean about 5 rooms. I had 1 week left in this job, and we had cleaned the whole section. We were supposed to tell it to our boss, and he sent us to this about 40-year-old weird man who was something like a janitor for the hospital. Before he came to us, we had started to smell sweat mixed with cheap perfume. So at that moment, we knew that he was on his way. Disgusting. He brought floor polishing machine. While he was polishing the floor, my friend went to bring back some cleaning stuff, and I stayed in a separate room with a sink to wash buckets, etc. Suddenly, I heard that he stopped the machine and headed to that tiny room I was in. He introduced himself. I did the same, and for unknown reasons, he told me his self-pitying story, how he was alone with his little son because his ex-wife attempted suicide, so they divorced. He really told that attempt was the reason of their divorce. I listened to him and didn't know what to say, so I just said that his story is very sad and I wished him good luck. I hoped that he would go away after that, but he stayed with me in the small room blocking the door, probably only us alone in the whole building. He started to say things like how he's seeking for a new girlfriend, and also mum for his son, how beautiful and cute I am, how nice my body is. I was wearing baggy hospital clothes, how he likes me. At that time, I knew that my coworker will come back, so I wasn't so afraid. I respond that I have a boyfriend, and his behavior makes me uncomfortable. It seemed that I made him angry. He turned red, slammed the door, took his machine and went away. I was relieved when my coworkers came back. I told them, they just laughed and told me to calm down, that everybody in the hospital knows that he's crazy, and I'll probably never see him again. Well, unfortunately, they were wrong. On the following day, our group was divided. Each of us were moved to another section, because our job in that building was done. I ended up in a department of internal medicine, where I worked with nurses. It was fine, and we talked a lot. Once I mentioned that weird janitor and what happened, they told me to ignore him. They also told that his ex-wife also works in the hospital as a cleaning woman in the building next to this building, and that she was physically and mentally abused by him, and because he had attempted to take antidepressants, their son was assigned to the father, weird janitor, after the divorce. And guess what? A few days later, I was nearly at the end of the job. I got a call from my boss that I had to go help to the department where janitor's ex-wife worked. She was very quiet and shy, but on the other hand, it was obvious she's happy to talk with someone new. We understood each other well. After a while, she started to open up and told me a lot of things about the domestic violence. She also added that her ex-husband was supposed to come this day to polish floors, and she was afraid of him. When I was coming back from the lunch break, the whole corridor was full of that awful smell. He was there, waved at me, gave me a creepy smile and said, "Hi, princess. You won't bite me, will you?" I wanted to go home immediately, but I knew it wasn't possible. So I told myself I'm brave enough to withstand that upcoming hours of my shift. I really tried to avoid him. I noticed that the more I ignored him, the more aggressive he was to his ex-wife. It culminated in the moment when he was phoning with some of her friends about shopping. He ran to her, took the phone and ended the call, grabbed her face and started shouting at her that she's a bitch because he hadn't allowed her to go shopping. She tried to escape, but he grabbed her arm and told her to go kill herself and she should try to hang herself, that this could be a successful attempt this time. I was shocked how brave she was. She just told him to F off and went to another room. He came to me and started his inappropriate flirting again. I was standing on a stepladder cleaning some shelves. There was a storm outside, so the atmosphere started to be a little more creepy in that empty hospital building. He said that he saw me commuting by bus to the job, and he suggested that he could take me to the bus station. I replied that I'd rather use an umbrella. It was the end of the shift. I came down from the stepladder, said goodbye to both of them. After I left the department and reached the corridor, I started to run because I had that weird inner feeling telling me how he would follow me. I rushed to my changing room. I couldn't lock myself there. Very quickly took dirty clothes off. It was hospital clothes. I had to return it after every shift and quickly dressed up into mine. I heard the door open. It was him. I nearly fainted. "It's a pity. I hoped you would be undressed. I'd like to watch your ass on that stepladder," he said. I didn't reply. He continued, "We can go together for my son to kindergarten. Then I'll take you to the bus station." I answered that this will never happen. He was blocking the door. Again, the building was empty. I didn't want him to know that I'm afraid. I tried to act as normal. I packed my stuff and was prepared to call police and get out. Suddenly my phone started to ring. It was my father. He was coming back home through the city and told me he was near the hospital and he'll take me home. That creep heard the conversation and came closer to me and told that not everyone is let into the hospital area, but my dad is a pharmacist and from time to time visits the hospital. I just told the number of the building and he immediately knew where I was. Thanks to the fact that the creep came closer, the doors were not blocked. I ran through them and continued running right into my father's car. I hysterically cried after I told it to my father. He immediately called my boss and announced that this was my last day working there. Later I talked with the boss, described him the horrible situation, and found out that this creep was his good friend. Nevertheless, the boss apologized to me, but nothing changed. I heard that this dangerous man still works there. I don't visit that city so often, but when I find myself near the hospital, I feel anxious. Whether he was friends with the boss or not, the fact that they let someone like that continue to work there was a failure of leadership. They should have fired both of them, if not just him. Behavior was horrible. Probably the first absence seizure I'm aware of having. I was driving to pick up something from a fast food place and was going 40, and suddenly I was much farther down, going faster, and there was a truck stopped at a light. I managed to stop in time to avoid the truck, and then when I pulled into the restaurant drive-thru, I couldn't read the menu board. I could see the letters and words, but they meant absolutely nothing. I wasn't having issues by the time my ex got home, so I didn't end up going to the emergency room for it. Neurologist appointment 2 weeks later said either absence seizure or TIA, most likely an absence seizure, since it was around that time I had several that someone was with me and noticed. I live in Ukraine. As many people know, Russia attacked us, and we have a war in our country. I live in a fairly peaceful city away from the fighting, but the Russians often fire cruise missiles at our cities. Once, I got out of the car and heard a strong hum, similar to the sound of an airplane. As I looked up at the sky, 2 cruise missiles went through me and then landed a few blocks away from me. The noise was very loud and scary. It sounded like they exploded right next to me. I panicked and fell to the ground. It was the scariest co-training in my life. At that moment, I was already ready for the fact that these were the last seconds of my life. Me and my brother were 2 years without talking to each other because of some crap he did. One day, he came home at like 12 p.m. after going to a party that started at 6 to 7 p.m. He was really drunk, something that was common, but this time he was very violent, specifically towards me. He didn't enter the house, but he was screaming that he was going to kill me. He's a really fat, strong guy. He definitely would have crushed my head, especially at the time when I was like 12 to 13 years old. My mother and her girlfriend were stopping him from entering, and that's when he punched the washing machine and basically folded that in half with the punch. My mother told me to go back to school because she was afraid of what could happen with me there, and I agreed. When I came back from school, I noticed all the lights in my house turned out, except the one from my mother's bedroom, which lit a little bit of the main room of the house. I entered and turned on the lights in the kitchen and called my mom. Nobody answered. I was already in shock. When I went into the main room and turned on the light, I was horrified. There was blood everywhere. On the couch, on the walls, on the floor, blood on the shape of a hand, and some that looked like someone was dragged. My heart stopped. I felt the world moving in slow motion. All I could think was, he killed my mother, and he's coming for me. I tried calling my mother to be sure. Nothing. Tried to call her girlfriend. Nothing. A good 30 minutes, what felt like 3 years passed, and I got a call from an unknown number. It's my mother explaining the situation. Apparently, my brother was in some kind of effect of cocaine and alcohol, probably even more stuff. When I left for school, he laid in his bed and started to OD. My mother rushed him to a hospital, and fortunately, now he's fine. That experience made me start to talk with him again, since I understood that I could lose him at any moment, and we're on good pages since that, thank God. My most recent seizure Was in the commissary with my husband, looking for a new shirt to wear to my nephew's 3rd birthday party, and the next thing I know, I'm on my back of an ambulance. No clue who, what, or where I was or where my husband was. I saw my mom outside of the ambulance and wanted to yell out for her, but I didn't quite have my bearings yet. Turns out, I had walked about 50 feet after picking out a new shirt, told my husband I felt like I was gonna pass out, mumbled something, got all stiff, and fell straight back, hitting my head on a concrete store floor, hence the confusion. The scariest part was being so confused with no recollection of what happened. I was hotboxing in my car at like 2 a.m. in a little nook at the entrance to a Forest Service road. You're not visible from the road if you tuck into the nook. It was winter, and I was getting chilly as the car was off. I fired it up and continued puffing away without realizing my exhaust in the cold air was giving away my position. Several minutes later, I detect headlights and realize a car is getting close. I panicked and started to leave, but then the red and blue lights came on and I knew I was effed. It was 2016. Weed was still illegal in Canada, and I stupidly brought the entire ounce I just bought that day. I rolled down my windows and hoped for the best. The cop told me immediately that he could smell it and that I could either hand it over or he would arrest me. I asked him to repeat that and made my decision. I reached into my console and grabbed a half-ounce baggie and handed it over. He asked me if it was my personal amount and then gave me a lecture that it's not legal yet. He said I didn't appear intoxicated and let me drive off. The moral of the story is, make sure to dress warm in the winter. I didn't even know people still hotboxed. I figured by now you young cool people would figure something better out. Anyway, I hope you learned the lesson. Don't carry all your stash in one go. I think watching someone die. I was brand new as a corrections officer, and we got a call around 4 a.m. that there was a prisoner in the unit screaming. Another inmate hit the intercom and told us. We run down thinking it was a hoax, but when we get to the cell, I find him. Reaching up, struggling to breathe, we call for the door to open and rush in, and as soon as I was in, he was gone. The lights in his eyes actually changed. I did CPR on a corpse for about 45 minutes until paramedics arrived, knowing full well he was gone. We had a defibrillator on him instantly, and it never advised a shock, just doing mouth-to-mouth on a dead guy. I had read his transcript, and the man was a piece of shit. Kidnapped and raped young women very violently, but in that moment, I just had to do my job. I'll never forget the sound of his sternum and ribs cracking as paramedics instructed me to go harder. When he was declared deceased, we all had to sit there with the body until the police arrived. It was just awful. Developed some sort of vitamin deficiency. Would be fine until I ate, then boom, no knowledge of who I was and only vague memories and almost no ability to think. My legs also would randomly give out and I was painfully short of breath. Went to the ER 3 separate times that semester. Each time was treated absolutely horribly, like I shouldn't even be there. Told it was just mental health and there was no way it was physical, even though I literally fell to the floor a few times. They refused to test for anything. I'm still dealing with this and can't find a doctor who believes me. Medical discrimination is no joke. Nobody will believe me on this, but shortly after Hurricane Harvey, I was walking to school because I was in a flood shelter about like 0.1 miles too far for a bus to come and pick us up for some reason, and as I was walking past the graveyard nearby, I happened to see a 10-foot tall, either skinny or straight up skeletal figure that was a very dark color and was dragging chains. I knew it was actually there because a group of dogs nearby were barking at it like crazy. It didn't seem to even acknowledge me, but I was frozen with fear the moment I saw it. Treading my way past the graveyard at a snail's pace, watching it as slowly as I creeped my way past. Shit scares me even to this day, and ever since I saw it, I've had reoccurring dreams of some sort of Native American sacrifice where they take me into the woods nearby and cut out my heart and eat it. I even did research, and the area is a burial ground for a Native American tribe that is primarily cannibalistic, so shit connects pretty well to me. One time when I was 5, I was in my room, and at exactly 3:42 a.m., I saw what seemed to be sleep paralysis demon with a hat, and it was smiling dead at me in the hallway. Keep in mind, it was a long hallway. and I got so scared that would not stop crying all the time for 6 months. And if I saw like a sliver of something white at night, I would cry and run away to my parents' room, and it happened at 3 to 4 a.m. in the morning. Then, my parents issued a counselor with me and asked, "Why are you always getting scared in the morning?" And then he gave me a paper and told me, "Draw what you've been seeing at night." Then I drew a tall figure with a shadow background, and it had a hat with a smile so big like a kid had too many Jolly Ranchers. Then that night, I woke up at 3:32 a.m. Then there I saw a tall man with a hat just staring and smiling at me. I was at a fight or flight moment. Then I chose flight. Then I sprinted to my parents' room, and I looked behind me in the reflection of the kitchen light. I saw the figure standing there smiling. After 6 months, this all stopped, and I was able to sleep more better. And to this day, I still see a glimpse of the tall figure in a hat smiling in the darkness, even though I'm 13 hours away from the original house. It's like the figure is a magnet to me and will never go away, for now until 2021. I named this thing Mr. Hatter, and then he completely was gone in 2021 and never followed me again, probably due to me maturing and not believing in those spirits. Also, try and picture the situation in your mind. The scariest thing I have ever experienced was when I was at my house in my room. We were getting ready for bed as it was a school night. Me and my sister slept in the same room. She was on her phone while I was about to turn off the light. That's when I heard it, a faint whisper of a little girl. It was decently high-pitched. My whole body froze and I felt a chill go down my spine. My whole body tensed up. I felt my soul leave my body, but then I remembered my sister was in the room. So I asked, "Did you say goodnight?" She told me no, and knowing my sister, her voice isn't high-pitched at all. It's medium. She's not a child, and she never had a high-pitched voice. My body tensed up again, and ever since, I haven't forgotten about that little girl. And I don't know why I heard it, but my sister didn't. Now, I always feel tense in the dark and never leave the light on, not after that.